Our interview for Coconuts TV today is with one of Cambridge United's and earlier Abbey United's earliest and greatest fans.
71 years.
He's now the fans' elected director and someone we wanted to talk to for quite some time. Colin Proctor, it's good to see you. And
Thank you
for
very
welcoming
much.
us to the Abbey. Tell us a little bit about your early years, where you started, where you were born, your family connection.
Yeah, I was born on the 21st of May 1939 in Fitzroy Street, Cambridge. And in December 39 we moved to Ditton Fields, number 122, and we was there for 30 years.
So you were born just as the war started?
I was the cause of the war, so my mum said.
But you didn't see your dad very often in those
No,
years.
my dad did 29 years in the First World War and the Second World War, and saw very little of him. Unfortunately, he got blown up in France at the end of 1944, never recovered, and come home January 1945 and was interned in Oswestry convalescent home in Wales.
Yeah.
Mum used to have to go up there for the weekend, which was an absolutely, you can imagine, a daunting task in those days on buses.
Yeah.
And then he was transferred from there to Holt in Norfolk, which was also a daunting prospect for a young woman that was bringing up 7 kids and working from 5 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night to bring a family up.
So where do you fit in the family then of your siblings?
I am the second youngest of the family. I've got 5 brothers and a sister. Our eldest sister died at birth, unfortunately.
So where did you live then? Where did you grow up? Where was you growing up?
I grew up in Ditton Fields.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
So
in and around the Abbey.
You are local.
I am local.
In a big way.
In a massive way.
Tell us a little bit about growing up in a pub.
Well, I mean, growing up in Ditton Fields was no different from growing up anywhere else. You was then, streetwise, probably at about 8 years of age. Always up to all sorts of capers, and everybody in the family had a certain thing to do each week, and the roster was changed because, as I said, every family, there were 19 fathers that went out to Burma, and Churchill capitulated the day the boat got out there. They threw the guns up, and the rest is history. You know what I mean? And everybody fended for themselves, and it was a unique area because even to the present day, we've had reunions. When there's a funeral, there's always 200 turn up, and you can bet 3/4 of those are Ditton Fielders.
So growing up in the area, you must have been aware of the football connection even then, although during the war it was barely kept going, wasn't it?
Well, no, during the war in Ditton Fields, every family had to take a RAF or soldier in. We had a Jewish family. We had a 4-bedroom house, and we had a Jewish family live with us for 2 years. Not that I remember them a lot because of my age, but they lived upstairs and we all lived downstairs. And that was the sort of thing. I can remember 2 people that lived opposite, 2 RAF players that played here at the Abbey, and used to walk to the Abbey with them, on a Thursday afternoon and a Saturday.
So on that note, let's start thinking about your earliest memories of the ground. How did you come here first? Who brought you here?
Yeah, my next door neighbour, Herbert Spicer, was a committee member at Cambridge United. At Abbey United. And one Friday night we was talking. I used to help him on his garden and also on his vegetable plot down at the Sundery Trenches at Whitehill Road. And he said, "Would you like to come to the football tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, I'll ask my mum." And my mum said, "Yeah, take him, get him out of the way." And Herbert and his wife used to sell tea at the end of the ground here, which was the old changing rooms, and was Dudley's ticket office in the days of the lottery. And Herbert and his wife used to bring about 25 cups and saucers in bags, which I used to carry now and again, and sell tea at half time. And that is how I got involved with Abbey United.
Okay, great. So as you say, you mentioned the changing rooms at the far end. That's the ones which are now the toilets at the far end?
Yeah, they're the toilets and the money counting office.
Yeah, we'll get to Dudley Arliss because he's a key part of the United
yeah, that's
story.
a lot later on. That's a lot later on. I mean, the actual changing rooms were directly opposite the main stand here, which were two corrugated huts, home and away. They were two green corrugated huts, and later on in my life, I used to go to the supporters club, which was started to be built at the end of 47, 48, and we used to take, three of us used to take 2 pails of water down for slopping down. There weren't no showers in them days, you know, and people used to, you know, scrape the mud off and then just mop down with a couple of sponges.
Yeah,
and that was called, you know, and then change and go have a drink in the supporters club.
Now it's interesting. You mentioned two words there that immediately made me think, and you said celery trenches. Now that's something. I'm a relative newcomer. I'm only 25, going on 30 years with you, so I'm a newcomer.
Yeah.
But you mentioned celery trenches, and that's a name I've heard over all the years. I mean, tell us what you remember.
Well, I mean, I never knew a lot about the celery trenches or when Abbey United played there, but where White Hill Road is now, that is where the celery trenches were. Obviously, I suppose, back in Victorian days, that's where celery was grown, because lots and lots of celery have grown in the fens, you know, and the soil around here was very good. And I've always known it up to, I think it was the end of the 40s when they started building Peveril Road and the other estates, you know. It was just playland. That's where marshals used to have every aircraft that crashed in East Anglia was stored there, 7 and 8I, British, German, French. Any aircraft that crashed was stored there, and marshals used to break them down. Okay. We used to help them at times.
whether they knew or not. Yeah. Okay. So we've got to the situation where you've been to your first game. You've been taken by your neighbour. You're obviously this is a big event because you remember it over many years.
Yeah.
Did you then become a regular, or was it an infrequent sort of?
Oh no! Never missed. Never missed, apart from national service, 58 to 1960. You know, I don't think I missed many games because that was all that anyone could do. We used to go to the ABC Miners on a Saturday morning, sixpence, and watch the films and that, and come out there, and you know, 20 of us from Ditton Fields, and we used to run down Newmarket Road to the Abbey. We'd be at the Abbey at 12 o'clock for a 3 o'clock kick-off, playing football on the pitch before the game. You know, we was all footballers, you know what I mean? We were the stars of Abbey United.
Getting chased off, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I mean in those days they weren't too fussy about the pitch. You know, I've got photographs of the pitch. You wouldn't believe it. There's more dirt than there is grass.
Yeah, we have Rodney Slack who said he didn't see grass between between November and March, I think he said.
Yeah.
So you mentioned some of the names from the whole area who helped out. You know, some you'll remember, the Millers, Harrison.
Yeah. There's Mr. and Mrs. Miller. There's Mr. and Mrs. George, the Morgans, the Jenkins. You know, I mean, if it hadn't have been for Ditton Fields, Ditton Walk, Ditton Lane, and one or two others, this club wouldn't have functioned because it was all on family-free enterprise.
Yeah. Now we've heard a lot, and we've dug as much as we could about Mr. Francis, who donated the ground, we believe.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any memories of contacts?
I've seen him at the ground on many occasions. Yeah. I mean, we was never obviously allowed to speak to him because Lord Francis is, you know, son. You know, I mean, but he bequeathed this plot of land for football on Saturday, and for farmers to bring their sheep on a Friday to crop the grass. You know, I mean, I can seriously remember, you know, bringing a couple of cows on here during the summer, you know, in the very early days.
That must have been interesting when the players came back, right?
Yeah, the grass was very green in certain areas.
There's one groundsman that you've mentioned his name to me. It was
Frank Pettit. Yeah, Frank Pettit. Yeah, well, Frank Pettit was a manager at Watson's Woodyard, just over Newmarket Road Bridge, Barnwell Bridge, and he come here as a committee member. He was groundsman, and I used to obviously go to school with his son Alan, and we spent many happy hours here on the evenings and that, where he used to be doing the ground, and we used to stand on the back of the roller, jumping up and down to flatten the bad areas out, you know, and you know, I mean, it was a family affair in those days, you know, I mean, everybody come in the evening to clear up and get ready for the games. I mean, because the games in those days, Cambridge closed on a Thursday afternoon, the whole of Cambridge, all the shops were closed, and we played football on a Thursday afternoon.
So we've taken you through, you've taken us through the 40s. You're basically getting to about 10, 11 years of age by the end of the 40s.
Yeah.
You're an established fan by this stage.
Yeah.
You've seen some things that told us some stories that we didn't know, which is fantastic. It's exactly what. But you're fully into it by the time we get to 1950. Now, through the 50s, the club seems to have got a bit of a more professional ethos. I know you said it was a community club even back then, and it seems to have stayed that way. But there was more a focus on how they moved forward through the 50s and setting up for the 60s. So how did you see it change between your, say, 10 to 20?
Well, first of all, if you go back to 1948, when Bill Whittaker came from Charlton Athletic and bought 5 of his players with him over the course of about 3 months, this club moved forward, in my views, of a young lad, you know, for the first time from what I was listening to the grown-ups and that, and turned it into a semi-professional side. And, you know, we were second to none. The side that we saw here were all old professionals, but really, really good footballers. So, and obviously the crowds in those days, you know, you would have, on a Thursday afternoon, you'd always have 4,500, 5,000. And when we had March, Galston, especially Clacton and Yarmouth, you'd have 6,500 here on a Thursday afternoon, all on a flat air. I don't know how half of them saw, because in those days the average height of anybody was about 5'8".
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now is 6'6" is nothing.
Now I've got to ask you, you should have been at school on a Thursday afternoon.
Oh yeah, I mean my mum used to say to me, because what it was, Arthur Morgan was in goal, and his youngest brother, Peter, was the mascot, and Peter and I went right through school together, and on a Thursday afternoon, coach used to stand in Ditton Fields, and my mum used to say to me, whatever you do, stay at school today. I said, Mum, I should be at school today, and I used to nip out at dinner time and meet Peter at the top of Ditton Fields, and we'd jump on at the team coach, we'd be away to March or Galston, and you know, because in them days, you know, if you never got home till 8, 9 o'clock at night, your mum's, you know, you were safe. There was no fear, and I mean, as I said, without being boastful, everybody in Ditton Fields that was a young boy was streetwise at bloody 9 years of age.
Different world.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely different world.
So you saw the club. You saw the club starting to change, as you say. Bill Whittaker brought in professional.
Yeah.
What was the change? Was that a change in attitude? Was it a change in?
No, I just think a change in professionalism, that you could see something was changing within the team and within the structure of football. Then obviously the board started to change. You know, there was other people that come in on the board, and that is where the change started, you know. And I mean, obviously with me growing up from the ages of 12, 13, 14, you know, then going on from the 50s in 1954, in the FA Cup, we had Newport County here, the first professional football club team, you know, that we'd ever played.
Yep, and indeed a very good result.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Drew here, and I left at Barnwell Bridge, couldn't believe my luck that I was going out of this country to Wales. First time I've ever been out of Cambridge, I think.
Absolutely. So tell us, as the team developed, did the ground develop as well? Obviously, the supporters club is one thing we want to talk about. How did that, for example, how did the ground change? How did the supporters club come about?
The supporters club, at the front of the ground where the supporters club stands now, was an old Victorian house, and right the way down to the road was trees. If you look at the supporters club now and see the trees that divide the common from the supporters club, that was right across trees and trees. That's how we got in the ground free, because we used to creep through the trees, and on the bottom right hand side of the pitch, left from here, was the old gents toilets, and we used to steal through there, jump over the wall, because they was all open to the elements, jump over the wall, and we're in the ground.
I would imagine there were some directors today and in the recent past too who may have had something to say about
Oh, yeah, I mean, Reg was a good friend of mine, and one or two others, without mentioning any names, but I always remember when Reg said, when he got on the board, you know, he said, well, Cole, whatever you do, don't let them know we got in for nothing. I said, half the bloody board got in for nothing. I said, that's how you grew up, Reg, you know. But they were good days, there's no doubt about it. I mean, from the age of 11, I was selling programmes.
Okay.
You know, and that is where I got the thought of collecting programs, because in those days the programs were a penny and tuppence, and you know, when you walked out the ground there was programs everywhere. Today you're paying £3 to £5 per. You don't see a program on the ground, which is good for the club because all the clearing up that was done, you know, and that is where I got my program collection from and started autographs.
Absolutely. So tell us how the ground started to change at that time. I mean, tell us about the layout, for example, of the stand. Was the Haben there? How did it develop? Each side? Were they
No,
to the element?
in those days, from the Bill Whittaker days, there was one wooden stand where we're sitting now that held 500 people, and on the left hand side, as you're from here, was Jenny Morgan's tea hut. And the rest of the ground, apart from the changing rooms, was all flat. I mean, the Haben, as you say now, was just a flat area. The north end and the south end were just flat areas of area. And people just come in, and the taller you were, you stood at the back, and the kids fought their way at the front. And then early on, there was a brick wall built all the way around the ground at about 2.5 foot high, which all of us kids used to sit on, you know, and watch the game. And then, going on from what I was telling you about the old house at the front, Geoffrey Proctor and Jack Woolley decided to buy the plot of land when the old lady died, and he had an idea that if the fans built a supporters club, in those days you could not take anybody in a pub up to 14 years of age, but you could take a baby in arms into a club. And he said, if you build a club on there, then we can suffice from getting revenue from the club. I mean, Bet and Fred Malbit opposite in the Globe didn't like it because they was going to start losing revenue from all the fans that went in the Globe.
Indeed. But obviously the club was built. Was it built by the supporters? Was it built by the director? Who took charge of building the supporters?
No, there was 2 or 3 families. The heads, Bill Head, was a plasterer. He had a business to plaster, and there was another, oh dear, hang on, I can't bring to mind. He was a bricklayer, and obviously there was bricklayers, and there was people that were that were members, fans, and that was built brick by brick. I mean, I can tell. I've got a tape at home done by Frank Pettit 6 weeks before he died, from 1920 to the 6 weeks before he died. And tells you everything about the early days of Cambridge United. He was a foreman at Watson's Woodyard, and he was driving a vehicle to deliver some wood over at Chesterton, and went past Pies in St Andrews Road, and they were stripping some buildings out, and he turned around and said, "What are you doing with that roof?" He said, "We're chucking it all down the pit." He said, "Well, could I have it?" He said, "If you can move it, you can have it." And he brought it to the Abbey, and they built the supporters club to the size of the roof. Something that would be a feat today to be achieved. And that roof is still there today, albeit it has all been clad over, because it was an asbestos roof.
So planning permission was retrospective, to say the least.
Well, Tom Gurney, who was worked at the university all his life and was a senior vice president, joined the Vice President's Club in 1969 when it was formed, but was what we class as super supporters in the Supporters Club. Bill Boutell, Stan Cutter, you know, Tom Gurney, Graham Nurse, and going on from the early days, David Rushton saw an area within this stand, the old stand, that could be done, you know, they could get 20 people in there, and that was where the Vice President's Club was formed. Sorry to jump a few years, but that was where but they were super supporters. And Tom Gurney, with his knowledge in engineering, he was a top engineer. He also had a lot of sway with the railway, and they dropped sleepers down by Barnwell Bridge, which the kids and that were all carried into the club. He dropped what shall I say, railway truckloads of old cinders that was barrowed in here and put to the north end. That had a slope of about 3 foot. When it rained, you used to go home, you was covered in black. The parents, my mum used to moan like hell when I went home. I can remember one match, I think it was 1950, we played Old Beach in the FA Cup, and it rained from Saturday morning till Saturday night, and they come here and beat us 2-1, you know, and I went home and my mum gave me a right beating because I was covered in black dust, you know. I was absolutely sick that we'd been beaten by, you know, what you'd class as an easy side.
Okay, so thinking about the 50s and thinking about the club itself, by that stage you'll be starting to remember players' names. Now, the oldest of the players we've managed to interview was Bob Bishop, about 18 months ago. He was 93 at that time.
Yeah.
So Bob's one, and I know his brother played for the club
Yeah.
too. Can you remember any?
Yeah, I remember Bob coming to the club.
Yeah.
Bob left Aldershot and worked at the Regal Cinema as a junior projectionist, and Frank Pettit heard that he was a footballer, and Frank went down there and said to him, would you like a game of football on Saturday for Abbey United? He said, yeah. He said, you ain't going to get paid, but you can play. Because in those days, obviously, a lot of the people were in the RAF or the Army and that, and they was doing their national service. And he come down here and played, and he was a good stalwart of the club, and his brother, you know.
Yeah, indeed.
And went on for many years, Bob did. And I stood with him after his finishing days. He went to a lot of away games, and I stood shoulder to shoulder with him, you know. But most of the footballers did. You know, most of the footballers that come to this town in the late 40s, 50s and 60s stayed in the town and worked at either Marshalls or Pies.
Yeah, seems to have been the big thing, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it was a good area to be from where you've come from,
yes,
and regular wage.
Just going back to the people that used to run the club, Colin, do you remember Jack Morgan that used to do the tannoy?
Yeah, of course I do. I grew up with the Morgans in Ditton Fields. Jack was the eldest brother.
Yeah.
All the Morgans were deeply involved with Cambridge United. It was all free enterprise.
He was the first one that played coconuts, wasn't
That's correct, yeah. Because, well, that was the only record they had. They had a record player, and they only had one record, and that was Coconuts, and that is what they, you know, because it was a jolly tune, you know, and that actually finished up. Well, it started off actually in the tee-up. Ginny Morgan had an old fire bell that someone gave her, and when you scored a goal, she'd ring that guy. That used to, you know, because we used to sit along the front of the stand on the steps. You know, and then be kicked off at half time when they come for a cup of tea, and that was nice to be able to sit on there and instead of sitting on the grass, you know. And then at the end of it, if we won, the whole of the Abbey area knew that Cambridge United run, because Coconuts was a big old horn thing, you know, and we used to be out on the pitch dancing, and that was played on many, many occasions. I can assure you, when you look back through the records, there weren't many games we lost here.
So thinking of a few names of players. We've mentioned Bob Bishop.
Yeah.
But obviously Wilf Mannion came a little bit later.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah.
What a name to throw in.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't believe, you know, with Wilf Mannion was coming here, you know. I mean, there was lots of good players that were here, you know. Ron Murchison, who's only just died in the last year. I mean, he was a great stalwart of this football club, you know. And from Bill Whittaker, we started to get some really good footballers coming into, you know, Cambridge, or Abbey United as it was in those days. It obviously changed in 1951 with the city being bequeathed as a university city to become a city rather than a thing, and we become Cambridge United from Abbey United.
So when did the big rivalry with City really develop? Because obviously there were times when there were crowds of up to 10,000 we heard at times.
Yeah.
Was that more 50s or was it 60s? Just a natural evolution?
No, I mean, Cambridge Town was an amateur side, even when they was, even in 1951 when Cambridge City, they were the third biggest, best amateur side in the country. And I've seen them when they played Pegasus here. I've seen, you know, I mean, obviously I used to go to Cambridge City sometimes when Abbey were away. I've seen crowds of 12,000 there in the amateur days, because it was originally a university ground with a football ground. I mean, it could have been a magnificent stadium for Cambridge.
Indeed. And there was always talk of the two clubs merging, but that never happened.
No, there was time. I've been to 5 meetings. I think the first meeting was in 1958 when we met at the Brunswick School, and being involved with the supporters club. And that I went to the meeting, it was absolutely full, and it was rejected by Cambridge City. And Cambridge City have rejected, and no malice, they're a football side, they deserve to have what they've got, and they rejected every time we went to a meeting to merge. We was even prepared to give up Cambridge United's name and play at Cambridge City. We was prepared to do that, the board were prepared to do that, you know, because we saw, from our point of view, from Cambridge United was doing well, we could have done probably twice as good if we'd have merged.
And sadly, they've now gone down to 200-300.
Yeah,
And moving to
unfortunately,
Sawston.
well, obviously when the Ridgeon brothers were there, money was no object. The building suppliers of Cambridge, you know, I mean, the teams that they had there during the 1958 when they entered the Southern League, when we did, the rivalry between Cambridge and City was absolutely fierce. It must have been like the, you know, the champion and the Premiership sides today, the Evertons, the Liverpools, the Manchesters, the London clubs.
Yep.
The rivalry was absolutely fierce, you know.
Okay, you mentioned, I'm going to drag you back a little bit. You mentioned a Newport game. Let's talk about football for a little bit.
Yeah.
You mentioned Newport game,
Yeah.
and big crowds here, and we drew
And we drew, yeah,
2-2.
absolutely, 2-2. Yeah.
And then you were off. You said,
yeah,
you
for
were
the first time in my life I went out of this country on a train to Wales. Yeah, and couldn't believe that Wales was similar to what England was.
different accents. Absolutely. So you got there, and won the game against Newport 2-1. Was that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we sung all the way home. And the one significant thing about that game was the police lent us their strip, because our strip was, well, if you saw him in those days, they used to take them home and that, you know, and you know, they were something to be seen. And we borrowed the we borrowed the police uniform, and both goalkeepers turned out in green jerseys.
Oh, right.
And obviously, I suppose in those days, the referees never went in and checked anything, because there was a little bit of a hold up. But anyway, the game was played with two goalkeepers playing in green jerseys.
Okay, so you moved into the next round, 2-1.
Yeah.
2-1. Goals from Seward and
Yeah,
Stevens. I think, was
yeah,
the-
Les Stevens. Yeah, Les Stevens come from Tottenham Hotspur, an absolute whiz winger.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know, and you're talking about somebody who was as classy and as clever as George Best of Manchester United. He was an absolute. Did I used to idolise those people? You know, Wilf, Mannion. I used to walk around him like he was God.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, whatever he.
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
he- Okay, so next round in that particular year took you to.
We played Torquay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I've got to say, okay.
Oh no, sorry. We played Bradford Park Avenue. I do apologise. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and they came-
76, my memory. You know, but yeah, we
Better
played
than-
Bradford Park
better than
Avenue and unfortunately lost.
So they came here
They came here. Yeah.
again, massive crowd. but
Oh yeah, yeah, massive crowd.
10,000.
Yeah, 10,000.
Figure that
Yeah,
out,
yeah. And I still maintain that it's one of the biggest crowds that we've ever had.
Yeah.
Some people said Chelsea, but you know, we'll talk about that later.
Was that a
You
good
know.
time? That would be a good time to be a fan.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you
Oh,
can see the club moving.
Absolutely, yeah.